What if a stronger you was found in a miracle that you experienced? What if you experienced a miracle because you acted on what inspired you? I'm going to share a story, and as you guys heard Tony say, my big story is about my sister. And growing up, I wasn't always an advocate. When I was a little girl, I literally thought my sister hated me. There wasn't a day that went by that Angie didn't kick me, bite me, spit at me, and I literally thought that when my parents said that my sister had autism, that autism meant that my sibling hated me. I didn't feel like I had a normal life. Every day after school, it was a family of four, my mom, dad, sister, and I. Every day after school, my dad would pick us up, and we would go into a therapy office. I had no idea what a therapy office was. All I knew is that my sister needed it. And I remember being a little girl and having this energy about my sister of feeling mad and sad and angry and resentment, because every time my family and I would try to have an experience together, I felt like she ruined it. I felt like she would have meltdowns, and it caused me to have this anger. And I didn't understand it back then until one day I was sitting in that therapy office with my dad in the waiting room, which, by the way, if you've ever been to a pediatric therapy office, this waiting room had like the most boring office chairs, no toys, no books, nothing to play with. My dad was like, bring your homework. I'm like, okay. And every day after school, 5 days a week, I would spend 1 to 2 hours a day waiting for my sister to get out of therapy. A speech-language pathologist comes out, and she asked, Mr. Castro, do you mind if I bring in Natalie into one of my sessions with Angie? And I looked at him, and I said, okay. So I go back, open the doors, I've never seen what's behind these doors. And there's this gym, this rock climbing wall and zip lines and toys and chairs. And I'm like, why the heck am I sitting in a waiting room? Like, do I have to have autism to play in this gym? I was so confused and a little angry, so I was pissed. And I go into the therapy room where my sister's sitting, and the speech therapist says, Natalie, I'm going to teach you today how to communicate with your sister and how to play with her. And I said, good luck. Little did I know that in that moment, in the next 30 minutes, that speech-language pathologist changed my life. I had this energy of this little girl of feeling like I couldn't be in the same room as my sister because she couldn't stand me. And after this session and all the things the therapist taught me, I went home and I told my parents and I begged them, please, 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 can I go back and be in every therapy session? Angie doesn't hate me. She just doesn't know how to communicate with me. Angie doesn't not want to play with me. She just doesn't know how. I want to learn how. The next decade of my life, I dedicated summers, nights, weekends to volunteering at therapy offices, schools, camps, when all of my friends were doing sports and fun summer camps. The most excitement I got was about learning about children with special needs. I learned everything from autism to Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, you name it, the diagnosis, I've been there. And it was because of one person, a speech-language pathologist, that inspired me to find more about my sister. Because when I was in that room, a light switch happened in my life. This transformation of energy from going to a resentment, of anger, of sadness, into an energy of curiosity, of passion, of dedication, and of hope. Hope of connecting to my sister. And with every therapist that I learned from every child with special needs that I was able to observe and help in their sessions, they were my miracle into helping me have the relationship I have with my sister today. And my sister and I are only 18 months apart, so she's the little sister. She's going to drive me crazy regardless, right? She's the little sister. And I remember it was my senior year of high school, and I tell my parents, I have a clear picture of what I want to do with my life. They're like, all right, Natalie, let's hear. I said, I want to become a speech-language pathologist. I want to help kids with special needs feel understood, seen. I want to help siblings be able to connect to their special needs sibling, and I want parents to see hope in their kids. This is what I want to do with my life, and I want to open up a pediatric therapy office. They said, okay, let us know how we can support you, and they did. There was this little boy that I got an opportunity to work with, and the parents hired me. I was 19 years old at the time, no master's degree, and they said, you are the person we wanted to call, and you are the person who an advocate told us was going to help our child. Long story short, the next 10 months of that little boy's life, on the first day of working with him, he bit me, he kicked me, he spit at me, and he punched me. Where have I seen this before? But this time, I knew what to do. This time, it was different. I knew exactly how to help this child because I have had a decade of experience of helping other kids and learning from amazing therapists. In 10 months, that little boy went from being an independent, being able to connect to his peers, not having emotional dysregulation in his classroom, and I told his parents that I'm firing myself because he's independent. You need to let him have his wings to soar. The next day, phone calls. Like 8 parents were giving me a call. Natalie, we want you to help our child. And it was parents in that same preschool of children with developmental delay, autism, Down syndrome who went to this school. And I said to myself, I'm one person and a full-time college student. I don't have time for this. But I couldn't say no. I knew that something inside of me had to say yes and figure out the how. In a matter of weeks, I was 22 at the time, and I go up to my parents and said, Mom, Dad, I know I'm in college, but I want to start my business. I want to start my therapy office. And they're like, what? What do you mean you want to start your therapy office? You're 22, you don't have your master's degree yet. Is it too early? I said, I'm going to let my intuition lead me, and I'm going to let my logic guide me. I'm going to figure it out, but this is what I'm meant to do right now, because families need me, and I know I can create a team. I called that office Pieces of Inspiration. I started with a team of 5 young, aspiring women who wanted to become professionals in the special needs community. And that team of 5 turned into a team of 10 amazing therapists. My sister had purpose. She worked in the office. We helped over 162 families in this office. My sister designed the logo, and the reason why it was called Pieces of Inspiration is because each of the children that led up to me opening that office was an inspiration to do it. And I had the support of my parents. They were all in. I was going to go to school to become a speech-language pathologist. I was going to run this therapy office. Like I was in my 20s. I was being cocky. I was like, all right, I got this, right? Who remembers in your 20s when like everything seemed totally possible, right? Nothing ever scared you. Little did I know that 6 months later, my father left. Gone. He was getting a divorce from my mom, but I didn't know it meant that he was divorcing my sister and I, and he left. Gone. I was angry. I was mad. I didn't know why he left. And I had to give up my dream of being a speech-language pathologist, because not only was I trying to live in my shoes, I had to live in his because my mom needed support for my sister full-time. So I switched my college degree to online. I ran my pediatric therapy office full-time, and I cared for my sister full-time with my mom, and we were a team. Little did I know that my father leaving after all these years of anger, resentment, sadness, abandonment, that my father was the person I exactly needed him to be to clear the path for the person I was to become next. And that person turned into advocacy with my sister. My sister and I have trained over 1,200 law enforcement officers around the country in Florida and Utah. We've trained pediatric ER nurses in a children's hospital. We've designed sensory rooms, and we do it together. The sister that I thought hated me in the beginning, that I thought couldn't stand me, ended up being my partner in this beautiful thing that we advocate for in our community. Because for so long, I thought to myself, well, did my dad leave because autism got hard? Did my dad leave because he didn't find purpose? I kept going back and forth in my mind for years. Why? And the thing that I realized was he was exactly the person I needed him to be. So if you're anything like me, and you've gone through an experience, and as I've shared my story, probably why you're here today is because there's a story that relates to you, and the theme of Stronger You stuck out to you. And if you're anything like me, you go to conferences, you read books, you listen to podcasts, you listen to quotes, and you get all inspired. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to read this book, and it's going to change my life, and then the next day your life is the same. Who here has experienced that? It's because we sit too much on the feeling of inspiration and we don't act on it. Because when we act on that inspiration is when we find the miracles in our lives. If that speech language pathologist didn't come out to the waiting room and invite me into a session, do you feel I would be here today in front of you? Would I have opened a therapy office? Would I have had my sister be my best friend? Would I have done the advocacy work? If my father hadn't left, would I have understood what the shoes of a special needs parent feels like? I remember sitting at the desk in my office with my mom and our special needs guardianship attorney, and she looked at me and she said, it's time for us to file guardianship. Angie was 22 at the time, and guardianship needed to be filed. And she looks at me and she goes, I reached out to your father, but he's given up his right to be a guardian. And in a split second, my hopes of my father coming back were gone. He didn't have an intention to come back in our lives. And then in the split second after that, she asked, Natalie, would you like to share co-guardianship of your sister with your mom? I had no idea what that meant or entailed, but I immediately said yes. And if it wasn't for me stepping into my father's shoes from going to a sibling to going to a guardian with my mom and being a team with my mom and my sister, I wouldn't have experienced what it's like to be with my sister full time. And it gave me perspective of what is needed in our community. What is needed for our community to understand when they see a child having a meltdown, that it's not that they're misbehaving, it's that they have emotional and sensory dysregulation. Or that when a police officer comes up to them and they're nonverbal or they're doing stimming behaviors, that they're not somebody that looks like they're on drugs in the community. They're stimming. All these experiences I had with my sister when I became a guardian is exactly what turned into the person and the team that my sister and I are today. So as you're finding that inspiration of an event in your life that you're stuck to, you're holding on to, that you're hoping will change, I encourage you to not just sit on the feeling of inspiration, but to act on it, to volunteer, to advocate, to educate. And within that, you will find your miracle. And within that, you will find a stronger you. And I'm proud to say that I'm a miracle with all the things that's happened for me, even though at the time it felt like things were happening against me. And I'm proud to say that that speech language pathologist is my miracle. And that you, each and every one of you sitting in front of me today, you guys are all a miracle. And I'm proud to say I'm my sister's miracle, and she's my biggest miracle. And my sister is here with me today. And I want her to stand up because I want all of you to recognize Angie. And and if it wasn't for that speech therapist, if it wasn't for the kids, if it wasn't for the therapist, if it wasn't for my father leaving, if it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't have the friendship and the best friend relationship that I have with my sister today. So remember this: inspiration without action is just a feeling. Inspiration with action is a miracle. and know that each and every one of you, within every single one of your stories, you can find your miracle because you are a miracle. Thank you.